You're live.
Hello, my name is Tyrone Alexander Dew. I am the author of Satellite Directed Energy Weaponry Terrorism, Illuminati Got Me. It covers 30 years of my life of being a victim of satellite directed energy weaponry terrorism, the same crime that these young men tried to explain before the horrific end of their life. I don't know if you remember Aaron Alexis, September 16, 2013. He went to the Naval yard where he worked at, and he murdered 12 people. After that, there was Myron, a young successful trial attorney for the district attorney in New Mexico. He quit his job abruptly, went to Florida where he grew up at, went to Florida State where I believe he attended college, and shot 3 people. His suicide note mirrors the experiences that I wrote about. Today, there's only one guy in our lives that could actually explain what's going on with us, and his name is ex-CIA engineer, Dr. Robert Duncan. Can you please tell the people what we're complaining of?
Yes, I've worked on a lot of these technologies, and I have a non-disclosure agreement with the government, which I absolutely respect. I work for the on projects for the Department of Defense, CIA, Justice Department, on such things as writing the artificial intelligence code to triangulate on nuclear submarines, inner city gunshot fire, the EEG control of robots, and the list goes on. But my recent research and my interest has been in 1,000 interviews that I have done to expose some crimes against humanity. And I've been collecting this data for over a decade, interviewing people like you to understand what are the methods of these no-touch, brainwashing, mind control, and behavior modifications experiments that have come out of the CIA initially, that it was discovered on a project that's a very generic name. They keep changing project names, MK Ultra. And they also use stalking methods that were developed under the FBI called COINTELPRO, counterintelligence. And it's how to control groups and populations and people that may make more of an influence in social cohesion that they're targeting and interested in.
Well, the technologies that we're complaining of, actually they're putting voices into people's heads. That is what these young men were complaining about before they committed the crimes. Aaron Alexis, he felt as if he was being followed. Now, you might not understand this, but they're using something I believe called extreme low frequency waves. These extreme low frequency waves, once they put a voice in your head, they're able to cause pain. And if you understand how, that could affect you, can't sit at work, you can't go to school, you can't do anything. Myron complained of the same thing, and both of these young men were complaining of, they're trying to force me off my job, they're trying to scare me off my job, and they finally did that to them. So Duncan, can you explain how people are hearing voices in their mind? Or can you explain that can you at least admit that it's true that these technologies exist?
They absolutely exist, but I want to take a step back with you.
All right.
What did these 2 young men, what was their real message? Why did they feel they needed to go to violence to get their message out? And did that work?
Well, to be completely honest with you, it gets to a point, I'm a victim, so it gets to a point of where you feel like you've tried to have a quality of life, and what's happening to you, there's no way to stop what they're doing to you, and it never should have been done to us in the first place. So they all felt like the only way they can get their message out of my life is being ruined, I'm hearing these voices in my mind, they're causing extreme pain, was to go out and actually commit violence. So did it help? Well, for me, if it wasn't for Aaron Alexis, my mother and family would have possibly thought I was still crazy. I published my book a month before that, and my family was wondering, what the hell is this guy talking about? He's talking like he's hearing voices, he's feeling pain. They've been doing this to him for over 30 years. And I was actually in the basement. My mother called me upstairs. She says, Ty, come here. I ran upstairs and a little upset because now I went from a guy who's made about $2 million before I was 30, and it was taken from me by the person speaking to me, causing pain, and telling me, if you want us to make the pain stop, this is what you have to go do. So they would force me to go to strip clubs, force me to go to, spending my money very irresponsibly. So, and they would say things like, well, you got to live like your kind of people like to live. And when they say that, they're referring to the ignorance of the black community. You know, how they go out and ostentatiousness, all the guys with the gold chains on and all of that. I didn't want to live that life, and I don't think these two young men wanted to either. So did their message get out and did it help? Well, it did help, but I do not condone going out committing mass violence.
Good.
And I don't think you condone that either.
No.
You know, there are other ways to get your message out. But Aaron Alexis, he worked IT. You know, he was intelligent. Myron May, successful trial attorney. I mean, we work our entire lives. Most of us come from the projects, you know, or we come from some poor neighborhood, and now we are a project, and there's no relief from it, you know. Aaron Alexis, he was told to go take all these different kind of pills, I believe, trazodone, whatever it was, and Myron May also. And these pills did not help these young men. And if you're a sane person, then, and you're taking prescription meds, what's next? You know, and it's not helping. The way that we know that we're targeted individuals is that the person speaking to us makes sure that we understand they're in complete control.
That's right.
You know?
That's called neuro-linguistic programming, and it's an entire field in the Army, and we use it in propaganda. But using this, what's often called voice-to-skull technology, literally piping subliminal messages and overt messages to the target that no one else can hear, you can alter behavior. Well, that's why commercials work. I mean, you're altering behavior based on the programming of television and radio, and you can do that with human beings. And so they were programmed. There's no doubt in my mind that they were true, what are called targeted individuals. And all that means is they were brought into these secret government programs that I mentioned earlier, and they're being experimented with. Now, maybe there is an end goal here, and we can only hypothesize about that, that more terror and more violence there is in our society, perhaps then they can get the population to take away gun rights. We don't know what their true end goal is here, but we can only speculate.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. With the, that's, you know, I was putting out a lot of tweets with after the Aaron Alexis. I said, you know, the government has turned this into a debate about gun violence and mental illness, when the true debate should be about cybersecurity, you know, because all of these technologies are done remotely. Am I correct? This is all, can this all be done remotely?
This is all done remotely now. They used to have to put you in a laboratory, then they would run the electroshock, give you drugs, use hypnosis, and then they could create split personalities and create Manchurian candidates. Now it can all be done remotely in the privacy of your own home. In fact, they prefer isolation.
Sheesh. So you mean like when a lot of this can be did while we're sleeping, a lot of this programming, you know, for those hours of sleep, those hours of just being at home, and, you know, these young men, you don't have to have a chip implanted in you?
You do not have to have a chip implanted in you, but and they used to do that. You know, there's Dr. Delgado, and he used to put chips in human brains, and they had wires and radio controls in their heads, and you can alter emotional states of his subjects. And but the technology has advanced much further than that. There are theories that that a sensitizer needs to be put into the individual to make them more electromagnetically sensitive under certain frequencies in order to modulate the brain, to pipe in the new information. And that gets to your other question, well, how do you transmit speech into a human being? And I can talk freely about 3 techniques. There's bone conductance. And that's, people might experience this by biting down on a spoon and flicking it. They can hear it in their head, this loud,
the vibrations.
The vibrations. It goes into the inner ear. There's one called EG heterodyning. I'm going to skip that one. There's one called ultrasonic heterodyning, and that is using ultrasonic sound waves and interfering them in a modulated low frequency state that the human brain can understand, and that's very directional and targeted. They often call it the audio spotlight, there's another name for it. There's the microwave hearing effect, or radar hearing effect, that was discovered by a couple radar engineers. If they stood in front of the radar dish, they could hear a buzzing, a tinnitus. And quite interestingly, is a lot of TIs hear that tinnitus. And that, arguably uses what's called a heating effect, and it expands the brain ever so slightly, vibrates it, which goes to the inner ear. The EEG cloning and heterodyning is much more complicated, so let's wait on describing.
I understand that. Please don't complicate or the audience. Don't confuse them. What I really want to know about is the ability to control emotions.
So it's very interesting. We think we're so unique as human beings, but we have an emotional signal cluster. Now, in universities, you can see this research being done, and you can imagine, the military and other agencies have probably about a 30 to 50 year advantage than what the public will know about. And you can research this, that certain parts of the brain light up under certain emotional states, and you can also inject those same signals into other human beings. So let me give you an example from the 1970s. An Army colonel, intelligence officer, stated that the Russians were broadcasting a psychotronic signal in the microwave frequency to the US. And so we started doing the same to them. And the final conclusion is they were trying to placate, to relax our population so we don't go to war. They thought we were the aggressors, and that's a quote from him. And so you can do it over a population. We know that. It's like putting Prozac in the water supply to calm the population, and so they don't protest, they don't care. But you can also do it to individuals, and very specifically. You can clone emotions onto them outside of the lab, and it's part of this remote technology.
Really?
Yeah.
That's something I experienced myself, and it really got to the point of where I wasn't sure if it was, I knew it wasn't me, because they were cloning the anger, the sadness, the happiness, and everything, and I was going, these are my emotions, I'm perfectly fine before I'm inflicted with these vibrations that I feel. And so,
Good.
Sorry.
So when they're cloning your emotion, you really have to be careful to figure out, is it your emotions that you're feeling, or is it something that's being inflicted on you? One way to tell that you're possibly going to feel vibrations going through your body, which amps up, your natural emotions, or, whatever it is that they're doing to you.
Well, human beings naturally, we're driven by our emotions, so it's the perfect lever in controlling a human being. And so they very much study how injecting different emotions in different situations will alter the behavior of the human being. And they've done this with monkeys. They've done it in a lot of different research that your audience can look up on the internet.
That's interesting. Well, you heard it from a guy who knows that it can be did. Now, these young men here, they complain about something that most people will never understand, and I'll try to explain it in my book before their events ever happen. It's called gang stalking. And from my experience, it's when other people, other humans, are hearing the same person speaking to us through using this microwave technology or whatever, or satellite, whatever it is they're using. And they're told to follow us around and, harass us as if we're doing something wrong. And these people believe that they are, doing something, for the government. They believe that we're terrorists or anything like that, and their job is to follow us around, to harm us. Some of them are even told to murder us. I mean, you might not believe this, but it's true. Aaron Alexis, he complained of being in the airport. He swore, he could have swore up and down that these people were following him, and it's very well possible that they were. Now, he could also have been tricked, because they have something called voice cloning technology, where they can clone a person's voice and play it back to you in your mind using the extreme low frequency wave technology. Myron May complained of the same thing. He complained of having, several police interactions and people following him. Now, I've had issues where in my life that I've known for sure that they've used the police against me, but I can't prove it, Now, their message was lost in the media. Now, we all know the media has a problem with covering the truth, but there is a huge problem with what we're talking about. This is not, everyone has lack of knowledge with this. I mean, here's a guy who's actually worked with these technologies. He didn't create them, he didn't develop them, he just helped with the research he helped with the research and development of it, I guess. Am I correct?
Yeah, research and development in different areas. This is the greatest weapon system, weapon of mass control over every population on Earth. And so there are thousands of scientists working on it, and they don't even know their small part because everything's compartmentalized.
So that's how secretive they keep you guys with NDAs and everything. Hey, you work on this, you work on that.
You don't talk to anyone else. There's only a need to know clearance, and but somebody is putting this together and using it on the
You're right. You're absolutely right. I mean,
scientists are like children. We just like developing stuff. We like playing with it. We don't know what it's going to be used for.
Yeah. And you're probably scared to ask.
Yeah.
You're probably told not to ask.
Yeah, you're told not to ask. That's right.
Well, it's interesting to me that you and I can sit here and have this conversation, and people will still say, I don't believe it. That's kind of like those are the same idiots who will go to a Lamborghini manufacturer and say your cars don't go 200 miles an hour. So you're going to tell a guy who's actually dealt with this technology, or a guy who's created the car.
But you have to admit, it is really unbelievable.
Yeah. Look, Duncan,
this is stepping on the toes of God.
You're not lying, but listen though, these guys, their lives, or the car accident at 200 miles an hour with this technology. My life.
They decided, in order to break this news story, they're willing to sacrifice their lives and other people's lives and call them collateral damage, which I do not agree with. But their methods, I don't think, worked because our media is so controlled. The powers that be, the four major news channels, the mass media, will not cover this at all. I mean, they're controlled by governments.
Yeah, I mean, their whole thing was mental illness, gun control.
That's just a way to discredit something that people don't understand. They don't talk about the true motives behind it. They just say, mental illness, too complex for you to know. There are other discrediting words. You can call someone dumb. Don't listen to them. But they're just discrediting words. Yeah. Listen to the information. Actually get the story and do your research, and then you'll find that there is a whole lot of truth that people didn't understand.
You've been doing research on targeted individuals after you figured out that, hey, this shit isn't right.
Yeah. And it's totally immoral.
What's the oldest or the first targeted individual that you can research going back to?
Well, you're one of the oldest. I found some scripts probably from 1962.
62.
But they can't be verified. Mm-hmm. I do know in 1976 there were a large number of TIs that came forward. And it seems that every time the military gets a bigger budget, the Department of Defense and the black budgets with the intelligence agencies, the number of TIs that come forward increases. So they're grabbing more projects, improving this weapon system, and the majority, I think, is efficacy testing, improving the weapon system.
Now, in your experiences, when they began doing this testing on subjects in the vast population, who were the people that they, first began to target?
Well, originally, and there's a long history of CIA and Army and you name it, they would target the black community, those impoverished, those that had no voice in the community, those that can't speak up for themselves.
Right, sort of like the Tuskegee experiment, when they actually took all the black people and made them believe that, you're getting free health care, but they pumped syphilis into them.
They actually pumped syphilis into them, and many of them died. And presidents later apologize. I can't believe we did that. Well, we're doing the same thing now, but even worse, torture experiments, euthanized as behavioral modification. Yeah, it's literally stealing someone's soul and future and liberty and happiness, everything.
It's interesting you bring up the soul. I believe you wrote a book called Project Soul Catcher.
Right here?
Oh, yeah, that's it. People wonder, am I religious? What's your background? Well, in my experiences, if you understand anything about the human body, it's pretty much frequency waves firing off from the brain whenever you tell your arm to move, whenever you close your eyes or anything. And it seems to me that this technology has found a way to completely mimic every possible brain wave that the human being can fire off. And if that's the soul, then we pretty much are soulless walking around. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I don't. Is that?
It's a matter of definition.
And I've never read your book, by the way. I might read it after this. But for many years, I felt isolated. I knew nothing about you. I didn't even know that you were out here trying to, raise awareness about this. And it wasn't until 2013, I believe. Yeah, it was 2013 that I first heard about you, and that was with the Jesse Ventura conspiracy theory show. That guy tried to make it seem like you were.
He made me seem like the bad guy. I was behind all of this. I think people can see through that. I worked on portions of the technology, but I am not the mastermind, as he called me, of this great evil.
All right. So now, a lot of these targeted individuals, including myself, we complain of pain. Is it possible? I know it's possible, but I just want to know, these frequency waves that are traveling through our body, because we can hear these people. Let's just say these are sound waves. Let's just say they're sound waves. If they cut them up to a certain decibel level, for me, I felt like my brain was being electrocuted. And these guys are complaining of the same thing. Is that something that's factual, or is it something that,
No. Well, there's some truth to it, that a lot of these weapon systems that target the human nervous system and the brain can cause brain damage if they're done with too much power. But really what they're doing, on the most part, is just making it feel like they're frying you, making you feel pain. And this is why it's called no-touch torture, and why it's so secret. And look at how long it took us just to have the president admit, yeah, we tortured some folks, and that's physical torture.
Yeah.
This is actually even worse through the perception of the human brain, but it's harder to prove because you don't have marks or scars on your body. You just have mental scars. And so how do you show those? And then they just write you off as, well, must be mental illness. So they have a perfect cover. And this will be exposed eventually. The civilian technology will catch up. And I've said this for over a decade. They'll pretend they just invented the technology, and they'll make sure it's regulated, and they won't use this for human rights violation. But they're doing it now, and they're just keeping it very covert. It's a cover story.
Well, Myron May complained of feeling like he was being burned, and I have felt that before myself. Yeah. And when I did my research, after all this happened to me, and I started writing my book, I started trying to figure out, well, what the hell are they doing to me? I could say what's happening to me, but does it, is there any proof? And when I found out, they had something called ADS.
Active Denial System, which works on 95 gigahertz. It's built by Raytheon. The Marines asked for it in the Gulf War, and they were denied. And Secretary of the Air Force, Michael Wynn, said we must test it on our own U.S. citizens so the international population doesn't get angry at us for the long-term effects first before we use it in war. He was fired right after that, so I assume it was for this comment. But it shows you what they think of us.
Yeah,
we're test subjects. We're all test subjects if you're not in the military.
Well, even I would have, to be honest with you, I would have preferred that they tested this on people in the military than me, and I'm sure Aaron, Alexis, and Myron May, feel the same way.
And that causes a burning sensation. It generally won't cause any permanent damage. It only gets absorbed into the very first layer of the tissue and stimulates the receptors that feel a fire, that feel heat. And so, and it works from a kilometer of a mile, a kilometer and a half away.
A kilometer and a half?
Yeah, that's out of most people's shooting range.
Yeah, you
the
can't
best
even,
sniper, you can't defend yourself. No.
And there's no way to get away from this. I mean,
Yeah.
we are people who are complaining about things that are happening to us in our own home, while we're at work, while we're out in public. And people who don't believe us because they can't see it, you know? This is all remote technology that we can't get away from. And none of you are safe from it either. For some reason, you guys just aren't being tortured. I'm wondering, what is it going to take for the American people, you know, to finally say, you know what, maybe these guys aren't mentally ill. Maybe this stuff actually exists. I mean, if you look at my book, I actually researched all the patents, you know, and that was something that surprised me. Because I'll tell you what happened. My ex-girlfriend, you know, I came home one day and told her, you know, after $2 million was taken from me and I had went through so much going to jail, and, you know, I told her, I said, man, these people, they really messed up my life. And she's going, what people? And I said, you know, it's these Nazis, you know, talking to me using satellite. And she said, have you ever looked this up? I said, this, you know, none of this would be on the internet, you know, because for several years I thought that I was, you know, I lived isolated because I never wanted to say anything to anyone because there's no proof. Do you know when she looked it up, Duncan, there was all kinds of stories, and not only stories, but there's actually patents for these technologies that date back to the 50s and 60s. So it's kind of like, who are they using these technologies on? You admitted that citizens in your Jesse Ventura, you say that American citizens are being tortured. Who are the citizens that are being tortured? It quite possibly is the people who are complaining. So what would it take for you guys to listen to someone who developed it?
Well,
developed
this brings us to, I think, your concluding point, which is, what do you want Americans to do? Why are we having this interview? Myron May, I just listened to his radio show, his interview before he went on his killing spree, and he said, I want a congressional investigation. I want American media to cover this and look into it. What is your purpose?
Well, my whole purpose is just to get the word out that this is happening.
So, to alleviate other people's suffering, so they don't get confused
exactly.
what's happening.
I don't want, my whole thing was this, I don't want their families to believe that they were mentally ill. Aaron Alexis' sister is writing a book, and she's fallen into the whole media, he was mentally ill. Your brother was not mentally ill. Myron May, his family thought he was mentally ill. His cousin, I sent him a couple of books and a few bracelets. You know, I designed a satellite electronic harassment awareness bracelet, which is something when I was going through my depression of suicide, it actually got me out of it to really be able to start putting this, you know, putting the word out. If I'm dead, I can't say anything. So for me, it's more so about listen to us. Understand we are not mentally ill. These guys here, successful, very successful. They were more successful than, you know, a lot of people, you know, who didn't go to school, who didn't put forth the effort.
No, that's right. I know Myron's story better than I know Alexis' story, and Myron follows these scripts. So the CIA have these torture scripts. They have to walk you down a certain path, and I don't want to get too complex, but it's called hyper game theory. And his script is exactly what I have interviewed 1,000 people for. His is the main one that they use on most people. So I have no regret calling Myron May a true targeted individual put in these government programs.
You know, it's interesting, Myron May and Aaron Alexis, they didn't really get to the point of where I was with this particular technology. There's something, Duncan, maybe you could explain this. I have these days where I forget things. You know, it's not that I forget, my memory's being wiped, I believe. Is that possible?
Well, yeah, and the military's been working on memory erasing drugs for quite some time, and the CIA, the MKUltra experiments that were exposed, they wanted to create a programmed assassin that could commit a crime, forget it, and pass a polygraph in case they were ever asked about it. So I'm sure they're just doing memory experiments with you.
The memory experiment is that possible to be remotely inflicted as well without drugs?
Yeah, absolutely. Under the right circumstances.
Right.
Now, we're not talking every moment of every
No,
second,
no.
but under the right
It's
circumstances.
just certain moments of my day,
Yeah.
you know, I completely forget. You know, it's like I have no recollection of what happened. Also, there's something called forced speech, man. And it's possibly going to, you know, be the reason why I won't be around anymore. But I have these days of where I can be sitting talking to you, and I feel a few vibrations, and I feel like something, you know, go through me. The next thing you know, I'm saying words that I would never say. I mean, we can have a whole conversation, and it's not even me talking.
Well,
you know?
yeah, and that, you know, you're getting into a very complex topic, but initially that capability was used to screw up the speech of potential politicians. And so they're testing it, they're improving it, but let me ask you, doesn't it feel like Tourette's almost?
Yeah.
Something that you're saying things that you would never come out of your mouth, and they don't have to be, you know, swear words per se. No. And this is, again, like I said, very complex. Your audio cortex has been mapped, and there are also always piping in subliminal messages into your brain. I mean, you're on the list, you're on the network, the mind network, and so some of that will come out through your own motor cortex, the actions of verbiage. It's a weird sensation. I know it's going to be difficult for you to describe, but it's quite common amongst TIs in a certain portion of the program. The programs can last from 3 months to years, like in your case, many years. Yeah. So you just haven't been taken out of the program yet. They're still experimenting.
But this is something that, you know, the whole forced speech, I can't find a patent on it. I don't know, you know, I've never really heard of it.
No, there will not be a patent on this.
There won't be a patent on this. But I mean, it's one of those things where I have to deal with the repercussions of what I'm being forced to say. And I'm trying to explain to people that, look, this isn't me saying this, you know, and even after I'm forced to say it, I try to apologize.
I know, but it's your body.
Yeah,
so,
you know, you're right.
Your body gets the repercussions, whatever those are.
That doesn't, you know, with any of you, I ask you this, what is worse? The fact that I'm saying what I'm saying, or the fact that I'm being forced to say it? You know, I don't think anyone would agree that, oh, but what he said is horrible. I think the more important thing is, why is he saying this? You know, what's forcing him to say these kind of things? I mean, I could be forced to say some of the meanest things.
Well, there are things called chatterbots that I worked on that can be integrated into this weapon system that constantly cause the mind to talk to this, you know, person or perceived person. It's actually it's a computer, and it will keep the mind spinning. But that bot, when in the right conditions, can cause you to speak some of its language. And these are not programmed nicely. These are demons. I mean, they're very bad, you know, vocabulary that's going to be cloned into your head and into your mouth.
So you and I having a conversation. This has happened to me before. It gets to the point of where I'm repeating what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You know, and
exactly.
like it's almost like I'm talking. You know, it's like my brain is trying to comprehend.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
well, it's puppet mode. I've heard TIs that have been made to slap themselves. You know, that literally it's puppet. They've created cerebral cortex cloning, and initially I think the CIA term was REHIC, remote hypnotic intercerebral control, and it's like a hypnosis. It has a little influence over you, but it should not have enough that you're going to harm yourself or harm anybody else's, you know, the way hypnosis works. And that's kind of how TIs have described what you're going through.
Have you ever, I don't know, any other... So Duncan, a lot of TIs are complaining of being threatened with promises of freedom. Myron May, he was threatened with, if you go out, he actually put a Facebook post up, you know, if he committed murder, that he would get his freedom. In my life, you know, I've been threatened with, if you don't do something that we're telling you to do, then we're going to murder your grandmother. And actually, she wasn't murdered. But what I didn't do, within minutes, when I ran upstairs, she has a pacemaker, and you know, she again slumped over in a wheelchair, and you know, we ended up having to use a life alert to send her to the hospital. So that took away all the idle threats. So I became completely, you know, pretty much like whoever the hell was talking to me, I'm like their slave, you know. It's like, you're threatening my family, you're showing me that you can
yeah,
do that.
and that was outlawed by U.S. protocol, even in the torture documents that were released under Obama. The threats of killing someone's family is not allowed, but they do it anyway. And it's a common tactic in torture and for behavior manipulation and interrogation. You don't tell us what we want to know, we're going to kill you and your family and do this to them. And so almost all TIs, and that's also why I know Myron May was a real TI, they get that script. You know, kill your father and we'll let you go, or you know, go on a killing spree or whatever. They say that, and you know, no human's brain's going to come up with that naturally. You know, it's a joke. And this is just classic torture.
So what he complained of, and you know what I wrote about and complained about, it's something that's just in the script of, you know, once you become a CIA or FBI, you know, this is how you're trained to manipulate the individual.
Yeah. These are scripts, and that's how they're trained. They go through them. I've listed, you know, quite a few of them in my book, Project Soulcatcher, but I'm coming out with what's called a no-touch torture document that parallels all these tortures that TIs go through, exactly follows the torture methods that have already been disclosed in the Senate Intelligence Committee summary of CIA torture.
Now, with your knowledge of all of these different technologies, microwave technologies, are they capable of causing heart attacks that you know of?
Yes, they are, and this was actually written about in the 1970s, supposedly by Russians that were ahead of us in this technology, but that's just how they get their budgets. We're ahead of them. That there is a way to cause such stress to the cardiovascular system, a runaway spooking, if you will, using these terror tactics, and that's what it is, it's domestic terrorism, to stress the heart enough that it can collapse if there's a weakness, or to cause a stroke. So they call it a remote heart attack.
A remote heart attack,
Yeah.
using remote technology. I mean, that's, you know, I'm laughing now, but it's a very scary reality for those of us who are targeted individuals. Also, I've had times, and maybe you can explain this, I don't know if you can or not, but I have images that are, in my book I wrote about how when I was a kid, you know, they would tell me, and they would show me images, and they would say, well, go show it to me on television, what we just showed you, and I would literally go flip through the channels and find the cartoon that they had just, you know, the person speaking to me had just put in my head. I mean, is that possible that they can turn my brain into a television?
Only if they're watching it at the same time. Usually what they do is they pipe in very scary mental images. So in physical torture, they'll use barking, growling dogs or insects, putting them on the person, things like that. With the no-touch torture, they usually use more mythological creatures like demons and such, and pipe those into the person's head. And they're being visually cloned to some extent. So under, you know, usually darker lighting, the person's what's called the visual workspace in the human mind will see this image and have some sort of reaction to it. So they're usually scary images.
And they can do the same thing, you know, while you're asleep with dreams. Pretty much create your whole dream.
Dream manipulation. Again, people won't believe this technology is actually here. And there's so many awesome uses for this technology for good. I mean, imagine your partner, your life partner, you can share a dream with them and you're both in it. I mean, it's just awesome. But right now it's just being used for evil, and it's part of the manipulations. American Indians always thought their dreams were from God, and so it's a way to manipulate a person and reprogram them even in their most vulnerable state, which is sleep.
And these weapons, they're calling them the voice of God. These are God weapons of God, pretty much.
Well,
Because they can mimic all what humans believe God can do.
Exactly. And so 95% of the world is God-fearing, and so they call them voice of God weapons because you can say, lay down your weapons, this is Allah speaking to you. And people,
They've actually did that, didn't they? And there's a storm, I believe I read somewhere.
I can't confirm or deny that.
That's maybe the NDA, folks. I don't know, but I respect it either way. But the earlier, we were talking about how they make you feel emotions. If you research, they did it to Wall Street protesters. So if you guys do any research to figure out, has this technology been used against American people, other than just myself talking about it, the Aaron Alexis or the Myron May, you can quite possibly find out that yes, this exists. How many people would you think are targeted individuals?
I get asked that question a lot, and all I can do is a minimum 10,000 worldwide, 2,000 in the United States. And you have to imagine, they can only collect so much data doing this. And the Pentagon had a paper that we can falsely imprison and abuse 1.6% of any population without a successful revolution. So it may be as high as 1.6% of any population. So there's a huge margin of error. The only people that come forward are those who know how to use the internet, make phone calls, and so I know I'm underestimating, but right now 10,000 is
that's worldwide.
Worldwide, 2,000 euros.
Barry Trower. If you guys do any research about this, you might find Barry Trower. He's a British Naval intelligence agent over in London. He actually admitted that citizens would be brought into this particular program. They would be made to seem like they were mentally ill, and then they would hire a psychiatrist that was unknowing to the experiment. And if the psychological evaluations came back as schizophrenia or delusional or anything like that, that was considered a success, and the test subject would be locked up. The people who are doing this didn't even care.
Well, that's right.
So I mean, this type of technology and this form of torture has existed for several years. I don't know what it's going to take for you guys to believe this, but I'm someone who's really tried in my life, and I don't think Duncan would be out here trying to expose this. I mean, we don't get any money from doing this. I mean, to be quite honest with you, everything's been taken from both of us. I don't know about you, but I don't see you living in a multi-million-dollar home, driving a Ferrari or a Lamborghini.
Greed is not a motive of mine, no. I'm here to help the human race. I understand.
And I really appreciate your help, because without you, these young men here wouldn't have had any kind of proof to say that this is what, here's someone who can admit at least that what we're trying to say is real, very real.
And people, and that's, I think, one of the points that you're making for this film is a lot of it's for family of people who are targets, that, you can believe what you want, what the psychiatrist will say, but remember, they're just trained by textbooks. There's no real science behind it, that industry. There's no blood draw that you can get that will prove mental illness. And so what the target, the victim, wants their friends and family to understand is, this is happening to me, this is real. Give them comfort words. Just say, yes, I believe you. I'm sorry, I don't know what to do for you, but I do believe you, this is happening.
And that would have helped these young men
that would have helped those two.
I truly believe it, because in my life, my family, once they really, I hate to say this, but it took Aaron Alexis' story, I believe, for my family to really, get into what's really going on. And, the families would be more understanding about this, and I'm hoping that
there would be less frustration, and then less events like this occurring.
Yes, exactly. Well, Duncan, thank you so much for the interview today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. All right.